everyone. My name is Claire, and I'm here to talk about our reading for this week. So we had chapters 5 and 6 to read this week. They're super interesting. There's so much good information in this book. It's like fascinating to me. Like all the stuff that I did not even think about, like as a teacher and like my students, so many things I didn't think about. It's so interesting. Um, but 2 chapters was a lot to have to choose, what to talk about. Um, so I have like 3 different parts, and I'll ask a question for each part. Um, so yeah, let's get started. So page 144, I think, is in chapter 6, affective factors. So it's talking about self-esteem, which is super interesting. Um, So a person's concept of self, acceptance of self, and reflection of self as seen in the interaction between self and others, of how much that affects us in a second language classroom setting. Um, I thought it was interesting, like, people who are learning a second language, like, they might start to feel, like, nervous, like, self-conscious in a classroom because, like, you're kind of losing your identity when you're expressing yourself in a second language, which thought was super interesting. I've never thought about that, especially because I don't speak a second language. So that was interesting. It says, in language learning more than in most other areas of the curriculum, our self-concept can often be truly endangered. The self is especially vulnerable because it is deprived of its normal, familiar vehicle of expression. So I thought that was super interesting, and it made me think about one of my friends is Chinese, and she's been learning English her whole life. But we were talking one day, and she was like, yeah, like I definitely think I have a different personality when I speak in English. She was like, I'm much happier when I speak in English. I'm like, what? Really? And she's like, yeah. She's like, I don't know if it's because maybe I know less words in English, I can't explain myself as well, or she couldn't really like attribute it to anything. But she definitely said like, yeah, I'm different when I speak Chinese and then when I speak English. So I thought that was interesting that she like could even point that out about herself. Um, so I guess, and I also said that I remembered that I've read that a few times in the book, that learning is like acquiring a second language. You kind of lose yourself a bit of like establishing yourself in the second language, like expressing yourself, new vocabulary, all that kind of stuff. So my first question is, for people who are bilingual, would you say you have different personalities in each language that you speak? Um, and what language do you feel most comfortable speaking in? Maybe it's not your first language, I don't know. And are there aspects of each language that you like yourself more in? If that makes sense. So basically, like if you speak 2 languages, can you talk about like how you see yourself in each language, and like do you have like a different personality in your second, third language or whatever? So yeah, I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say about that. Okay, question number 2, or topic number 2, still chapter 6. Let's see, talking about extroversion and introversion. So that's going to be page 155. Let's see. So I thought this was interesting because it was talking about how we assume that all extroverts will excel in foreign language, which is not necessarily the case after reading this, which I thought was very interesting. And I definitely had my own definitions of what I thought like being an extrovert and being an introvert were. But when thinking about it like applied to a classroom setting, it was really interesting to read about like how the different students, what they excel in and stuff like that. So, so it talks about sometimes it could be hard because let's say we're teaching in America and we have like what we think is normal for a classroom, speaking out, asking a lot of questions, having an opinion, a strong opinion sometimes. So it talks about how like culturally, maybe like using Asian cultures as an example, it's not really what they do to like speak out, have a strong opinion, participate a lot. It's more about listening to what the teacher has to say, respecting the teacher and what they have to say. I see that sometimes with my South Korean students. Like, I can tell that they don't understand something, but yes, yes, yes. Like, that's all they can say is yes, yes. And I'm like, are you sure you understand? Yeah. And I know that they don't, but I think it's kind of their culture to just, yeah, we understand, we get it, teacher, we know, right? They don't want to, nobody wants to speak up and say, oh, wait, I don't really understand, which I feel like a student in the States might. But, so my question for this part is, how would you deal with a class? So let's say we're in the United States and we have a class of Japanese adults who have just moved to the United States. And they're in like a beginner English class. How would you motivate them to participate? Because they're going to have some different ideas of what to do in the classroom. So what would you do to get these adults to participate? Like, but at the same time respecting their culture and not making them feel like super uncomfortable. Yeah, so that's my question. How would you help this class get used to an American style classroom? What would you do to help them feel comfortable and participate? Okay, so that's that one. Last one is page 163. Talking about motivation, which is super interesting. I didn't know everything to me is super interesting, but it's talking about there's so many different kinds of motivation. But the two main ones it was talking about are intrinsic and extrinsic. So I guess, let's see, where are we? Oh, I'm sorry, it's page 160. I'm sorry. So extrinsic motivation is like tangible things, like you give the child a sticker, or you, great job, like some praise, or an A on a test, right? But then we also have the intrinsic motivation, which is more like self. You get satisfaction from doing well just on your own. That's kind of your motivation to do well, which I thought was really interesting. But I could see it in a way of adults are probably more aware of their motivation to learn a language. So like intrinsic, I think they would have more motivation in that way. So my question for this one is, what are some ways to intrinsically motivate child learners? So it's like, what kind of activities would you do? Like, what kind of approaches would you take to motivate child learners without like tangible rewards? Like, what's a way to kind of like dig that up deep inside of them that they want to do well in the class? So yeah, it was also interesting in our notes for this week. Apparently the person who wrote our book, Douglas Brown, he's like really big into intrinsic motivation. So that was interesting to read. That kind of connected with our notes. All right, this is a long video, but I hope you can answer the questions, and I look forward to hearing some answers. Okay, bye guys.